So started Food Babe.
This was only a couple years ago.
Yeah, and I just started writing about things I was really passionate about, and I started to realize I had a knack of asking questions nobody was asking before.
Like what were some of the questions?
Well, no one had really asked Chipotle, I guess, publicly online, what's in your food? You say your food's with integrity, but what's actually in your food? What are the ingredients? No one had done that.
Do some of these companies not show ingredients? I thought they have to show ingredients, don't
they?
Or
don't.
They hide them, or it's like
they
really
don't.
hard to find?
Actually,
Really?
they don't. Not all of them do. And so there's big, huge companies like Papa John's who don't release their ingredients online. However, their competitors like Domino's and Pizza Hut do.
Okay.
And Chipotle, back then, when I started asking the questions, didn't.
Right.
And thankfully, because of my investigations, they started labeling their ingredients GMO or not, and started removing some of the bad ingredients. And they're getting rid of the majority of bad ingredients I wrote about, the ones that were very controversial. When I realized someone as large as Chipotle or Chick-fil-A or Kraft or any of these big companies were listening to someone like me, I knew I could no longer stay at that job.
And you started this at the other job that you were doing, right? And then
For a year and a half.
It started to pick up.
Yeah.
And I remember when I first heard about you, it was something about Kraft. Like you basically changed the whole thing that Kraft does now. And I want to talk about that in a second. But I also I remember you doing a video, like eating a yoga mat. And then and talking about some word that I can't pronounce. And then later, like 3 months later, seeing Subway come out with a commercial saying they no longer have that ingredient because you were specifically talking about it. And I thought to myself, wow, if one person can create enough of a conversation so that a large company like a Subway or a Kraft or Chipotle or Chick-fil-A listens and takes action to change something, I said, that is really powerful. And you've worked in kind of solving a lot of the issues with Kraft, Subway, Chipotle, Chick-fil-A, and Starbucks, and having them change their ingredients. And what was the thing with Kraft? What actually happened?
Well, one of the things I realized as soon as I quit my job, which was the scariest thing ever, by the way, because this was a pure passion project. So I didn't know how to sustain myself when I quit my job. And I was in the house, and I was sitting here, and I'm living in a condo surrounded by the banks that I used to work with in downtown Charlotte, and going, oh my God, I have no boss, I have no job, and I'm a food activist now. Wow, this is crazy. I cannot believe I'm doing this. When you're working on a passion project out, and you're also working in the corporate world, you're not putting your 100% effort into it, even though it's like kind of taking over your world and your thought, and you're sitting at work and you're thinking about your next investigation instead of what you're supposed to be doing. That started to happen, but I was still like straddling these two jobs,
You had to take the leap.
Right.
Yeah.
And then when you put your 100% focus in something, wow, the doors just start opening.
Sure.
And so the first thing I started to investigate was how food in Europe is healthier than the United States. What has happened is Europe has been regulated on a precautionary principle that these chemicals are considered guilty before they're innocent. Here in the United States, they're innocent until proven guilty. And so in Europe, there are several chemicals that are either banned or not used or have warning labels. And one of those chemicals is artificial food dyes. Yellow 5, yellow 6, red 40.
They don't use any of them there? Or they're labeled specifically with a warning?
Well, they label them with a warning.
Okay.
So they are banned in certain countries. But in the UK, they have a requirement that you have to put a warning label on it that says may cause adverse effects in activity and attention in children.
Kind of like cigarettes, basically a warning on a cigarette box.
Right. But it's a warning on a box of candy or a box of mac and cheese. Like if you were to import a box of mac and cheese from the United States to the UK and sold it in a specialty store, it would have to have that warning. But you know what Kraft did to try to get away without putting that warning? They reformulated their product without yellow 5 and yellow 6 and used real ingredients, paprika and beta-carotene, for European citizens, but not for us.
Why not?
So they found out that there was this health issue, right? associated with especially children. Who's the biggest population of mac and cheese eaters in this country? Children.
Yeah.
And to say, you know what, instead of putting that warning label on the box, we're just going to reformulate for them, and we're not going to do it for all of these millions of people in the United States, is immoral and unethical.
So why did they do that? Because it's a lot more expensive to put the natural ingredients in, I'm assuming? And
it is a little bit more cost, but in the long run, it's not that much. I mean, these corporations are making billions of dollars collectively. So it's really unfortunate that these companies have gone unregulated like this, and it's up for us consumers to hold them accountable.
Sure, because if we keep buying, they'll keep selling it to us.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. And so I started a petition and
against Kraft.
Yes, to remove these artificial food dyes. And I tell you, it was.
So you weren't saying don't make mac and cheese anymore, don't sell us this. You were saying take these specific ingredients out that other countries don't have in their foods.
We should be able to eat junk food without the risk of hyperactivity or cancer, because some of these artificial food dyes are contaminated with carcinogens. You know, we should be able to have things without them harming us. And so I tell you, that period of time really changed me, because what I realized quickly, the petition got over 200,000 signatures in a week.
Amazing. So you posted on your site or online with a petition, and people could sign online.
On change.org. I actually used change.org back then, and they were an amazing partner. And they really helped carry the message, and they really helped guide me too. I'm like, what do you do? How do you do a petition? And how do you do all these things? And now actually I'm teaching some of those principles in this book. Like how do you start your own petition?
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, there's an appendix in the back.
Very cool.
In the back of the book. But
so what happened with these 200,000 names? Did you say, here Kraft, like, look at this, or what was the next step?
Well, they continued to be really basically sending us PR, can I say bullshit on this program? PR bullshit to us. And actually the story of what happened when I went to go deliver those petitions to their headquarters is the first introduction chapter in this book.
Wow.
And it's gut-wrenching.
Okay.
You know, I don't hold back on how I felt when that was happening.
Sure.
And the really unfortunate thing with Kraft is that they weren't really willing to hear all of these consumers. Now this petition has close to 400,000 signatures still to this day. They're starting to slowly take out the artificial food dyes. They've taken it out for kids' products, and they've taken it out for their deluxe products, and I think they're going to eventually get rid of the rest. It's just going to take them some time. But, you know, what's really the most critical point of that petition, what it taught me, is that there are thousands of people really being affected by these issues. Thousands of parents sent me letters. Their kids' asthma went away. Their kids' eczema went away. Their kids' activity improved at school. Their kids got off their ADHD medication. Their autism lessened, the symptoms of autism. I mean, personal letters from parents. I actually took those with me, printed them all out. It was a stack this big. Took them with me to Dr. Oz, the show, and like waved them in the air on camera at Kraft.
And what happened?
Well, that's when I had to go deliver those letters and that petition. And when I was carrying those boxes of signatures, I mean, I really felt the weight of those parents and those children that have been affected by artificial food dyes. And it still remains a problem today, and a problem that I'm going to continue to fight for.
Wow. That's incredible. What do you feel like has been the biggest challenge with all these companies that you've been addressing with the artificial ingredients or the ingredients that are healthy? What do you feel like has been the biggest challenge so far? Which company has been the biggest challenge to work with? Which, and which one has been the most enjoyable, I guess, if you could say that, to work with, or has been actually willing to listen to you and take your counsel and say, okay, we do want to make changes. What are some suggestions?
So let's start with the positive. So a few years ago, there was something in my fridge that I had no idea what was in it. And it was a bottle of Newcastle beer. Everything else, I knew what was in it, but the Newcastle beer had no ingredient list. And I was like, well, why doesn't it have an ingredient list? And knowing what I knew about the food industry and how GMOs have infiltrated everything.
What's GMO stand for, just so people know?
A genetically modified organism.
Okay.
And have just been...
Where scientists have created an ingredient to then go into the food.
That's right. It's a new species of plant, basically. They've
we designed.
That's right. It's not from nature.
Yes.
This is in a laboratory. They inject either DNA or insecticide or some other type of concoction and put it into a seed and then grow that as new.
Amazing. Okay.
So, and the problem isn't so much that technology. It's not even about that. It's about the fact that they're paired with an increase in pesticides. So the chemical companies who have developed those seeds are the same chemical companies selling the pesticides.
Okay.
So it's a pesticide issue. It's really not about...
It's not about GMO.
It's not about biotechnology.
Okay.
It's really about the pesticides. And the pesticides is what is really causing a huge environmental impact and the rise in cancer rates. If you look at the President's Cancer Panel, who independently looks at cancer rates, has said that 41% of us are destined to have cancer. Some of those reasons can be related back to these environmental toxins.
With pesticides is one of them. So if it says GMO, does it mean it has pesticides attached to a GMO, or so the GMO is the GMO bad, or is it just depend?
It is creating new proteins that have never before existed.
So it's different for your body to
right.
digest, and it may react.
There are certain studies that show different things, and what's really concerning to me is that there's no mandatory safety testing on GMO crops in this country before they're introduced. All the other countries around the world, they have this. They require it or they label it, right? Okay. They either say no, you can't sell this here, or you can't grow this here, or we have to label it so consumers have to know.
Warning: this may cause certain issues.
But here in the United States, these companies are spending millions of dollars to prevent their name from being on there. Like, they don't want us to know that genetically modified foods. I mean, think about it. The Super Bowl is happening, right? It's around this time of year, and think about all of the companies that spend millions of dollars to put their name right there front and center. The biotech companies and the chemical companies are trying to take their name away from this. They're trying to hide this from us. Wow. So you've got to wonder, why are they trying to hide so much?
I'm interested, though. You know, cigarettes, they have a big tax, and I believe here in New York they have a big tax on them to buy cigarettes, and also they have a big warning label, and a lot of them have like people with like cancer on them. It says cigarettes cause death, even maybe. I'm not even sure exactly what they say, but there's big warnings on them, but people still do it. Do you think if those warnings were on our food labels in the U.S., that we would still eat it, just like people are addicted to cigarettes?
Well, the GMO label is not even a warning label. It's just a transparency label, just to know what you're buying. I mean, it's like how you know that you're drinking orange juice from concentrate. We should know if our food's genetically engineered. And so when these same food companies did this in Europe, they're still selling food there. It's just labeled there, so consumers
you're more
know.
Educated.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so it's not, this is a smart business decision for companies, especially to give them this information. But I tell you, there's something funny going on if they want to hide it so bad. So that's your first kind of, when you start to investigate, you kind of wonder, well, what's going on here? And when you look deeper into some of the studies that have been done, they're very alarming and very concerning. And now we're seeing the main ingredient, Roundup, which has glyphosate in it, in human breast milk, which is a huge toxin. I mean, linked to autoimmune disorders, cancers, all sorts of things. So this is a huge issue. But going back to that Newcastle beer,
tell me about it.
I had no idea what was in it.
Sure.
So I was like, why doesn't beer, alcohol, wine, liquor, why doesn't any of it have ingredient labels? Why can't I know what makes this raspberry flavored vodka or this beer? And so I started to investigate, because it was the one thing that was in my fridge that I wasn't personally drinking. My husband was drinking. I care about his health. And was looking into what was in there. And I remember it took me over a year, almost maybe a little bit less or a little bit over a year, to quiz the beer companies enough to even write an article about what I found out about the beer industry. And what I found out was shocking. Most of it had GMO corn added to it, so it's not the basic ingredients of beer, malt, barley, etc., yeast, and water. It had caramel coloring added to it, so they could use a different kind of malt.
Just like Starbucks.
Yes, just like Starbucks. And it had artificial dyes added to it. It had different types of propylene glycol added to it, which is a derivative of antifreeze. There was things that vegan and vegetarian people would be concerned about. Isinglass, which is produced from a fish swim bladder. Carrageenan, which is linked to intestinal inflammation. So all of these things were in beer that I had no idea what was in it.
Because it wasn't on the label.
It wasn't on the label. So I felt like this needed to change. That blog post, when I wrote it, went so crazy viral. Millions of people saw it. And I realized that people are really fed up with this. And so I reached out to Anheuser-Busch and Miller Coors. And at first, they wouldn't respond back to me. They gave me the basic mumbo jumbo. Sorry, we're not going to release our ingredients. We're not going to tell you because it's proprietary information. But as soon as I did a petition and got close to, I think, 40,000 signatures overnight,
oh my gosh,
they responded. And the first to respond was Anheuser-Busch. And they were, when you asked who was really nice to work with, they were incredible to work with. They emailed me right away. And I told this whole story on the blog, so if you look at old blog posts, you can read this story. But they emailed me right away, and they invited me to their headquarters to
in St. Louis.
Yes, and to learn about their processes.
Interesting.
And look at their ingredients and meet their head brewmasters. So I went and did that on my own dime and dollar. It wasn't consulting or anything like that. I went there and I met with them, and I've been trying to convince them to develop an organic beer that isn't contaminated with any GMO ingredients. So
that's interesting. Very cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, are they taking any ingredients out, or are they doing anything different, or is it still the same thing?
Well,
are they labeling it?
Well, they are posting all of their ingredients online now. They've slowly started adding all the beers on there. I think they're almost all the way up there. So if you go to tapintoyourbeer.com, I think that's their website, you can see what's in their beer. And some of the things are, really bizarre, like high fructose corn syrup in my beer. I had no idea. I mean, think about all the people who read packages and avoid high fructose corn syrup, and they had no idea that they were drinking it in beer. Now they do.
And if you want to learn about the key foods you need to eat to master your health, make sure to watch this video right here.
The lining of our gut and actually break through the border.
Really?
Yeah, they really do.
And that's what causes eczema and
bingo.
causes breakouts.
Yeah, exactly. Acne, brain fog,